So, good evening. Tonight's topic is going to be very different. I want to talk about human errors and how this can spill into history. Though probably most people are not very concerned about these kind of things, but especially if it comes to diaries and letters and, personal letters and those things. But I would like to give you an example in our case here. I mentioned this in my other video about Wikipedia as an example, who cites books, many times history books or books written by scholarly historians and that sort of stuff, and biographies mostly. And sometimes, or more often than not, there's errors in Wikipedia because it translates out of the book they're actually citing. And to actually understand this, because I come across this quite often, where I read something about our house or my family, the extended family. And like I said, I have a pretty good sized archive and I know how to find stuff. And I said, this doesn't sound right. This just doesn't add up. When you read it online or you read it in a book, for instance, it could be that a person is described wrongly in terms of their personality or, that kind of stuff. And he was described as being a violent person, when in reality he wasn't, and that sort of stuff, or the woman was described in a certain way and she wasn't either. So those things, and then you have dates and events and names are getting all mixed up. I want to give you an example. Let's just say we have Uncle Ernie and Aunt Bertha. And both of them are siblings and they have 6 nieces in common. It is just an example, okay? Now, niece number 3, we won't even give them names. We just say niece number 3 gets married on a Saturday in May, whatever year it may have been. And Uncle Ernie was invited to that wedding, but Aunt Bertha couldn't make it because she's already older, she's frail, she can't travel anymore, she had other commitments and that sort of stuff, or another family event she had to go to. Now, Uncle Ernie now sits down at night and writes a personal letter to Aunt Bertha. And he writes in there, accidentally, that he went to the wedding on a Sunday to niece number 2. Okay? Because Uncle Ernie had a good dinner, and at dinner he had a couple glasses of wine, and then after dinner he kind of felt full, so he sat in his recliner or in his armchair, and he decided to have a couple more cognacs and maybe a glass of beer with it. So by the time he finally gets to writing the letter, Uncle Ernie is already in a slightly elevated mood, say the beginning of blurred vision. And now we put this a couple 100 years back, at the time when there was no electricity and there were no oil lanterns, so to speak, so you had a candle. So Uncle Ernie is dressed for bed, which meant he was wearing a long one-part sleeping suit already, because it was getting a little bit chilly. It was still getting chilly. And Uncle Ernie is sitting on his little desk in his bedroom, and he got the candle standing there, and it is dark. It is hard to see anything. And he's a little bit soused. So he's writing now that he went to the wedding on a Sunday for niece number 2. But again, we know that the wedding was on a Saturday, and it was niece number 3 who got married. So he mails the letter out. Aunt Bertha gets the letter. She reads it, and she says, God must Uncle Ernie have been drunk when he wrote this, or what did he smoke? All right. So Aunt Bertha takes the letter and puts it into her personal archive. It's a done deal. She knew when the wedding was. She knew who got married, and Uncle Ernie's letter is now collecting dust over the decades. Some 200 years later, some historian digs up Aunt Bertha's archive. They're finding these papers somewhere in an attic, in an old broom closet, who knows, in an old suitcase somewhere in a basement. And they're now all delighted. They're finding all that personal information. So the historian sits now there. They study this. They take pictures of this. They analyze the handwriting, the script of it, and everything else. And they come to the conclusion that niece number 2 got married on a Sunday, whatever date that may have been. But the reality was that the wedding was on a Saturday, and it was niece number 3. This is one of the most common things you find in history. And if you have an average historian who doesn't know how to research this stuff, which 99% of the historians are, I'm sorry if you're a historian and you watch this, this is what my experience is. So they take this, what they found now in that letter, for granted, because that's what Uncle Ernie wrote in whatever century it was. Now, if I get to talk to the historian, and he said, well, Uncle Ernie wrote this. Well, I said, I know Uncle Ernie wrote this. I can see this. Have you looked at his handwriting? Do you know what time he wrote this? Do you know how drunk he was when he wrote this? No. They don't want to hear that. And I say, look, this wasn't niece number 2 got married on a Sunday. It was niece number 3 who got married on a Saturday. Well, do you have this somewhere in writing? No, we don't. But we know because it's family. It was on a Saturday, and it was niece number 3 who got married on a Saturday. They won't accept this. So now you have a distorted fact about an event and a person associated at the wrong time at the wrong place. In our case, for my particular line, it is more often not that difficult because we have kept records for the castles, expenditure records, accounting records, we would call them today. And in those records, we can go back and look and say, well, niece number 3 actually got married on that day, and it was a Saturday. And we can show that to the historian and say, here, if you look in our archives, in the accounting books, you can see this. We have spent, or there was so much money was spent, so and so many guests were present, and maybe a few other details. And then we have other books too. We have ledgers and journals where we document letters and events and stuff like this, where we have more information we can look up. So now we can directly, contradict of what Uncle Ernie actually wrote in his state of mind. If it comes to my family, with my 3rd great-grandfather, I can tell you if he wrote a letter, because I know his handwriting, because I have looked a lot of many of his letters he wrote, and which I had gotten collected here over the years. And you can see when he was doing that during the daytime, and when he was doing that at night, or when he was tired, or when he was in combat, in battle somewhere, and he wrote it in his tent and wrote something. None of my great-grandfathers, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, never kept diaries. Neither did my father or my grandfather, to my knowledge. We don't have any. We never did any diary writing. But those are these things, and how they can get completely blown out of proportion. And a lot of times, when historians search something, they like to go by these papers, even though there's other nonsense in there. On the other hand we have letters which were, official business, where, especially within the Prussian military, there was a lot of writing about personal folders or that kind of stuff of a soldier or of an officer, and that was all kept track record of, and that is documented. But there's also errors in there because it is just human to err, and sometimes it is pretty interesting of what evolves out of it. I want to give you an example. I do not know if this is going to work, but you should see now a picture. And this picture you're looking at is from a diary. from a guy named Gustav. What was his second name? Now I forgot his middle name. Gustav Erbkam. 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 He was an archaeologist, and he was in Egypt in 1842 to late 1842 to early 1844. He spent about 2 years over there, running around between the pyramids and going in there, digging up the sarcophags and analyzing all of this stuff. And they were taking imprints of the hieroglyphs in the pyramids on the walls and all of this stuff. And my third great-grandfather traveled out there in early 1843, and he met this Erbkam guy, which you're looking at in his diary, on April 7th of 1843. This is a picture of the actual diary you're looking at. And you can see this with my great-grandfather. There was his, we would say today, entourage, but there were a few people traveling with him, and one of them was a guy named Strömer. And you can see that Erbkam made his entry into the diary late at night on that April 7th. And they had some wine after dinner that was customary, and then they smoked the pipe. They used to smoke pipe, and God knows what they smoked. There could have been hash, over there, Middle Eastern, Turkish hash, or who knows. I couldn't tell you, because they had no real pain medicine, so the natural alcohol, the natural remedies were alcohol, hash, and opiates. I'm not kidding you. That was quite common back then for all of the stuff, and that was prescribed. Anyway, he wrote the first Strömer as secretary with an H. As you can see, that is the longer red line rectangle there. And then he repeated the name 2 lines further down in the same paragraph, and he wrote Strömer without an H. Now you have to know 2 things, and of course, since it is my family and I know all these stories, I can tell you that. I could have told you that back then. The Strömer with H became my third great-grandfather's secretary in 1847 or 1848, 4 years later after this was entered. The Strömer in the second line was the guy who was traveling with him, and that was not his secretary at the time. It was the Hofführer. There is no English word for this, but today we would classify this or call this a personal assistant. That is the person who does all the travel arrangements for a VIP or a celebrity, we call that today. Arranging quarters, arranging transportation, getting luggage moved from A to B, and that sort of stuff. And that's what Strömer's job was, and he was hired specifically. This is now the Strömer without the H for this particular journey of my third great-grandfather. And when they returned to Berlin in the latter part, I think it was early August of 1843 from this trip, they were gone for like 5 or 6 months altogether. I have to look up the exact travel dates for how long they spent there. But I think it was somewhere around there. May have been June by the time they got back. Somewhere around there. They were there for a few months. And they came back. And then Strömer became his official, Strömer without H became his official Hofführer. Now, in order to substantiate this, what I'm saying is, we, the Prussian state, or the Kingdom of Prussia, published an annual book. It was called the Handbook of the Prussian State. And that was a book, I would not call it a handbook. It had about 1,000 pages on average. And every person, from the king all the way down to the mail carrier, were listed in there, in every part of the Prussian kingdom. No matter what police station it was, what city it was, mayors, courts, judges, everyone was listed in there. There was no one left out. It was a who is who in the state or in the Kingdom of Prussia. every year it was published. They wrote this thing, say like by the early fall of the year, for the next year, and it was published and released by the end of December, early January. It was distributed to all civil, or every office had one, whether it was the post office, whether it was the police station, jailhouses, the railroad. It didn't make any difference at that time who it was. And it started out with the king and his family, then with the children of the king, which my third great grandfather was a part of it. So he was listed with his court in there. And there you will find that Strömer without H was officially his Hofcarrier beginning in 1844. So 6 months after they returned, they were published. The Strömer with H as secretary is published in 1847 or 1848 book. So, and this was now picked up, that error which Albrecht made in his tent there, or in the housing they had in Cairo when he met my third great grandfather on that April 7th of 1843, and he got the two names mixed up. He wrote it first wrong and then correct, caused some historians in Germany in the early 2000s to pick this up. They wrote a book about it, and they didn't ask me. They never do usually. They didn't ask me, and they got the whole story wrong because they assumed it was the Strömer with H, the secretary. And it was not the person who was in Egypt, and this was not the person who was on the court. The Strömer, the Hofcarrier, the Hofführer, was with my great-grandfather until 1846. Then he got a different position in the military because he served for my great-grandfather, my third great-grandfather, and he made a career as a Prussian officer after that in the Prussian army, and he did quite well. And that was the time then when the other Strömer with H came into the picture. And that has been spread now in multiple different Wikipedia posts based on the book, where the book author didn't know about the handbook of the Prussian state. Now, if you want to write something about our family, the House of Hohenzollern, the first person I would contact is someone within our house, and about the line or the branch you want to write about it, because we probably can aid you in getting the story right, so you don't print something and you sell books. Now, for the better part, it is that way that this was not a big, book deal, and it didn't make a bestseller list and all of that stuff, so the damage is very little. But this happens a lot to me, that I read something, I said, this is some utter nonsense. And then, of course, there's a lot of stuff you can't find anywhere in online archives or online databases, where you would have to come to us in order to find the details about certain things. And I will get into the story about the two Strömers in a separate video. And because there is a fourth cousin I have who is involved, or her great-grandfather is part of that story, her second great-grandfather. And so I want to consult with her first, and I want her to make a video which I will incorporate into this video here. She's over in Germany. She's a very nice lady, and her name is Angela Sabak Elcher, and we have her contact, and she's a really great person. And so I will have her have some, ideas and thoughts and stuff like this, and hopefully we can incorporate this all into one video and present this to you. But this is kind of the stuff, the uphill battle. It's not really a battle. I shouldn't call it a battle. This is just the way things work, I guess, in life. I don't know why that is, why people would avoid talking to one group. And I think Georg in the main line has a similar issue, because Georg has things in his archive, which relates to their branch, basically, which is the main branch, more or less. And, of course, there's stuff in their main archive which is not in the public archives of the Prussian state in Geheimen Preußischen Staatsarchiv in Berlin. That's what that is called. It's a non-profit organization where a lot of the stuff from the Prussian state itself, from the Kingdom of Prussia, is collected in the Prussian military primarily. So, if you don't know, you can always ask me a question if you have a question by posting a comment, and I will see if I can answer it. So we're not unapproachable people. We're not floating somewhere, sky high. Our politicians today do. We don't, because we're out of this business. We're not in the celebrity business, really, and we're not into any of the stuff to begin with. We're all leading ordinary lives today, as probably any other citizen in any country. I have a business. I'm gainfully employed, basically. I have to work. I have to get up every morning and do things and help people. And I have friends in all walks of life here in the United States with all sorts of backgrounds, and I'm very grateful for this. I have 3 YouTube channels. You're watching one of them. The other channel I have is my car channel, because I own a 35-year-old Mercedes-Benz I bought for $750 of eBay 4 years ago. And I fixed it. I fix my cars. I work on this stuff. And I'm driving it. It has 347,000 miles now. And it is my daily driver, and I love my car. And that channel has now 2,800 subscribers, and people ask me there constantly questions about what they need to get fixed and what they don't know, and I hopefully can help them. And then the other channel is my latest child, so to speak. That is HO scale trains. I'm gonna say, my God, yeah, you have an adult, full-grown, old white man, and he plays with toy trains. Well, I had that since a long time, and it actually got me into the engineering business, electronic engineering. I'm in at an early age. It has sparked my interest in electronics. And so I still have this. So on this channel, my HO scale train channel, I'm showing mostly on how to repair the little locomotives when they're older and they break or they don't work right anymore. I make videos about those, more of education to help people. So if they have a locomotive which doesn't work anymore, they shows them how to repair them, or how to convert them to the new digital formats we have for digital train operations and that sort of stuff. So that's the kind of stuff I do, if you were interested in it. Yeah, but this is how this goes with it. And I'm officially banned on Wikipedia. I voiced my opinion once about a family member, and that was taken by great offense by the Wikipedia community in Germany. I mean, I was banned from there. This got so bad because I had left. First I edited the Wikipedia page. That was an absolute no-no. And then I put a comment in there in the discussion section. And that obviously wasn't the right thing to do either when I was trying to point the errors out. So what the Wikipedia ended up doing is they took that original, I can document this to you in a video, they took the entire Wikipedia post about my ancestor down, and they recreated a complete new one. And as soon as I come with my IP address on the Wikipedia trying to add something to it, except for pictures, I can't. It's immediately gone and barred and deleted everything. So this is kind of it. So I've never understood this. So you're trying to help people to get the history correct. If there's errors in it, there's errors in it. Then it cannot be corrected, obviously, because they don't want to listen to the source. You're writing about my family. Who do you think knows more about my family? You, who reads some books somewhere from God knows who wrote them? Or me, who has lived this and been around the people and lived with the people who have known the generations before me and the stories and everything else that comes with it. This is true for any person who has any ancestor's biography on Wikipedia, is that they're gonna find out, they're gonna look at this stuff. Georg, on the other hand, is, from what I understand, is he's very quiet about this stuff. He never objects or anything. I tried it. This was back in 2011. I did this in April 2011. And wow, I've never expected that kind of a reaction. I've left them alone since. And now when I read something about someone, it doesn't necessarily have to be my family, and I read something about that person or a person, a biography, and I think I have some doubts that this doesn't sound right, then I look at the sources and the source references, the citations, and then I'm trying to obtain that source reference, and I read the source reference. And more often than not, this goes two ways. Either the Wikipedia author didn't understand what he or she was reading in the source reference, or deliberately omitted some of it and then quoted only half of it, or the source reference is wrong. Like here in this case with Strömer and Strömer, with H and without H. Well, anyway, I wish you a great night, and I be back.